The story begins with a beautiful nurse named Gwen who is working in a hospital. As she enters in a room, she finds an elderly patient struggling to breathe. However, instead of helping her, Gwen turns off her oxygen, causing the woman to suffer and eventually pass away. Gwen then steps out of the room and shouts for doctors, claiming that the patient couldn't breathe. As all the doctors rush to check on the elderly patient, Gwen stands by the door, watching and smiling. This reveals that Gwen is a psycho nurse who takes pleasure in seeing her patients in distress. Then the scene shifts to a house where a couple named Mira and Todd reside. They share a strong and loving relationship, and also have an 8-year-old son named Max who suffers from a condition called muscular dystrophy, which requires him to use crutches to walk. Nurse Gwen also works in this house, as Mira hired her to take care of their child, and Gwen has become like a part of their family. As everyone gathers on the table for breakfast, Max's crutches accidentally falls on the ground. When Gwen tries to pick them up for Max, she deliberately loosens the ferrule on one of them, knowing it would cause Max to fall while walking with his crutches. This reveals Gwen's pleasure in causing harm to those she is supposed to take care of. After that, when Todd was leaving for the office, he gets very close to his wife Mira to bid her goodbye. Gwen watches this from a distance and becomes jealous because she has developed feelings for Mira's husband. Once Todd leaves, Mira's friend Kathy comes over to her house to chat. However, Gwen pretends to play with Max as an excuse to eavesdrop on their conversation. Kathy advises Mira to fire Gwen from her job, as she believes that both her husband and son are becoming too fond of Gwen. But Mira dismisses Kathy's concerns, saying she's just overthinking things. Suddenly they hear a loud cry from Max, who has fallen due to his crutches breaking because Gwen had loosened them earlier. Mira rushes outside and blames Gwen, saying she should have kept a closer eye on Max. However, Max defends Gwen, claiming it wasn't her fault, his crutches broke on their own. Following this incident, Mira calls the doctor to order new crutches for her son. Later that night, Mira apologizes Gwen for getting upset with her in the morning. Gwen tells her that there's no need to apologize, as she understands the worry and stress Mira goes through seeing her son in such a condition. Gwen then prepares a therapeutic tea for Mira as a gesture of understanding and empathy. The next day, Mira joins a support group for parents with children suffering from muscular dystrophy. She shares her own story with the group, and it lightens her heart to connect with others who understand her struggles and challenges. Later, when Mira returns home, Gwen offers her the tea she had prepared. Mira enjoys the tea and eventually falls asleep for a while. After some time, Dr. Keller arrives at their house with the crutches that Mira had ordered for Max. Gwen answers the door but stops Dr. Keller from going inside and meeting Max. She explains that Max is sleeping, so she will give the crutches to him later. Before leaving, Dr. Keller mentions to Gwen that she feels like she has seen her somewhere before, but can't quite remember. She assures Gwen that if she recalls where they may have met, she will let her know. That evening, Gwen goes to Dr. Keller's house and admits that she was right. She does recognize her and suddenly injects a lethal drug into Dr. Keller's body. Gwen then reveals to Dr. Keller that she is the same nurse who worked with her in the hospital and tried to harm an elderly patient earlier, a patient whom Dr. Keller saved. Gwen is afraid that if Dr. Keller remembers everything, she will reveal the truth to Todd and his family, which is why Gwen injects a lethal drug into Dr. Keller's body. Dr. Keller, in her last breath, asks Gwen why she does all these evil things. Gwen responds by saying that it gives her a sense of power, and departs from the scene. That night, Mira receives a call from a man named David, who claims to be a member of the same support group and shares that his son suffers from the same condition, and his age is also same as her son. Upon hearing this, Mira becomes emotional and asks David to turn on the camera because she wants to see him. However, David explains that his computer doesn't have a camera, and the profile picture he uses is also quite blurry. David reveals that his wife passed away from cancer, which is why he hired a nurse to take good care of his son. Mira shares that they have also hired a nurse for their son, to which David responds with praise, saying she did the right thing. It's at this moment it is revealed that David is actually Gwen, who is using a voice changer to communicate with Mira. The following morning, Mira's friend Kathy visits her at home, and during breakfast, she accidentally spills juice on Todd's shirt. Gwen takes Todd's shirt to the laundry to clean it. While Kathy is on her way to Mira's room to retrieve her purse, she notices Gwen sniffing Todd's shirt. This observation makes Kathy feel a bit strange, and she begins to suspect that Gwen has feelings for Todd. However, Kathy chooses not to share her observations with Mira because she doesn't want to create any problems within Mira's family. Later that night, Gwen, pretending to be David, calls Mira again and begins flirting with her. But before Mira can respond, Gwen abruptly hangs up the call and rushes over to Mira, catching her talking to another man, in the hope of making Todd suspicious of Mira. As she leaves, she informs Todd that Mira was talking to a man in the middle of the night and tries to implant suspicion in Todd's mind against Mira. However, Todd, taking his wife's side, supports Mira and explains that she's been working a lot lately, struggling to get enough sleep, and just needs some rest. He reassures Gwen that she is just overthinking. Then Gwen bids Todd goodnight by hugging him, which slightly unsettles Todd, and heads to her room. The next morning, Gwen is in the kitchen with Todd, constantly seeking opportunities to be close to him. Shortly after, Mira enters the kitchen and notices that Gwen has already completed all the household chores and even prepared breakfast for Todd, something Mira usually used to do. Mira had slept in longer than usual and didn't remember coming to the room to sleep last night. She had fallen asleep on the sofa. Todd advises her to take some rest, given her unusual sleeping pattern. Later, Mira receives a call from Kathy, who thanks her for sending flowers on her birthday. However, Mira finds this odd because she didn't send any flowers to Kathy. Gwen explains that she has forgotten Kathy's birthday, so she checked Mira's calendar and sent the flowers on her behalf. In reality, Gwen's plan is to completely replace Mira and establish herself in Todd and Max's lives. Suddenly, Mira feels dizzy and falls on the stairs. Gwen helps her to the sofa. Mira mentions that she might need to visit a doctor but asks Gwen not to tell Todd about it. Gwen reassures her that there's no need for Mira to see a doctor, as she will take a blood sample of her and send it to the lab for the reports. That night, Gwen once again pretends to be David and talks to Mira on the phone. While Mira is on the call with David, her husband and son enter the room, prompting her to quickly hang up. Todd asks Mira to come to the bedroom to sleep, but suddenly her vision blurs, and she tells Todd to go ahead, saying she'll join him shortly. Eventually, Mira falls asleep on the sofa. During the night, Mira's phone receives a message from someone named Weber, stating, "David is a fraud." In the morning, when Todd checks on her, he discovers she's still asleep on the sofa. He checks her phone and finds messages from Weber and David, but he has no idea who these individuals are and why Mira has been chatting with them. Later, when Max comes to say goodbye to his mom before going to school, he's puzzled by why her mom has been sleeping so much lately. Subsequently, Mira receives another message saying David is a fraud, and Gwen, who is sitting nearby, reads it as well. After that, Mira goes to the office, and there she informs her friend Kathy that her blood test results came back fine, just as Gwen had mentioned, and that she only needed some rest. However, Kathy suggests to Mira that she should get a second opinion, one that has no connection with Gwen. At that moment, Mira receives an email from David, who mentions that Weber wants to defame her. Simultaneously, she receives an email from Weber, stating that her son's life is in danger and that he wants to meet her. Kathy advises Mira to meet with Weber, but it should be in a public place to ensure safety. Upon returning home, Mira shares this information with Gwen and informs her that she plans to meet this man at a cafe the next day. Todd overhears this conversation from outside the room and begins to suspect that Mira may be cheating on him, as Gwen has already planted this thought in his mind. The next day, Mira meets Weber at a cafe where he reveals that he is the real David. He shows Mira a picture which was used by the fake David on his profile. He explains that he has never spoken to her and that someone was impersonating him. He says he doesn't know who is behind all of this, but the same person did something similar with his wife, who had cancer. They manipulated her into not getting chemotherapy, and she passed away a month later. Now he doesn't want this person to do the same thing to anyone else. After their conversation, they exit the cafe, and Todd had been discreetly observing them from his car parked nearby. Mira and Weber hug each other, which makes Todd's suspicion turn into certainty that Mira is indeed cheating on him. On the other side, Kathy visits Mira's house to deliver some office documents. Since Mira is not at home, Kathy seizes the opportunity to confront Gwen. She tells Gwen that she knows Gwen is interested in Todd and that she saw her sniffing his shirt. Kathy warns Gwen that if she messes with his family, she will mess with Gwen. As Kathy starts to leave, Gwen attacks her from behind with a flower vase, rendering her unconscious. Afterward, Gwen places Kathy's body in Kathy's own car, drives to a deserted road, injects a lethal drug into her body, leaves the car there, and returns home. At home, Gwen notices Mira in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She discreetly steals the knife and hides it in a handkerchief, the same knife Mira has been using to cut the vegetables, and it now bears Mira's fingerprints. Afterward, Gwen goes to David's house and reveals that she was the one who had manipulated his wife online and prevented her from receiving chemotherapy, which ultimately led to her death. Learning this infuriates David, and he advances towards Gwen to choke her. However, Gwen uses the stolen knife with Myra's fingerprints and kills David. Before leaving, she also drops Myra's blood at the scene which she had collected for her blood samples. That night, Todd returns home in a drunken state, deeply upset because of his suspicion regarding his wife's actions. Gwen, dressed seductively, is ready at home hoping to get closer to Todd. Todd wants to talk to his wife, but she is still asleep. Seizing the opportunity, Gwen tries to seduce Todd and even kisses him on the lips. However, despite his intoxicated state, Todd pushes her away and tells her to go to her room, as he is still loyal to his wife. Later, when Mira wakes up late in the morning, she finds a message written on a water bottle placed in front of her. The message reads, "Took the little guy to school therapy," indicating that Gwen has taken her son Max for therapy. After reading this, Mira checks her phone and recalls that the fake David had also consistently used the phrase little guy during their conversations, raising her suspicion that Gwen might be the fake David. Mira disposes of the water in the bottle which was placed by Gwen for Mira in the sink. After pouring it out, she notices a powdery residue in the bottle, deepening her suspicion. Mira decides to investigate further and checks into Gwen's room, where she finds evidence of both sleeping pills and potentially lethal drugs. This confirms her suspicions that Gwen had been adding sleeping pills to her water, explaining her excessive sleep lately. During this time, Mira realizes that Gwen has returned home, so she quickly exits Gwen's room. Gwen notices that Mira is still awake, indicating that she hasn't drunk the water she provided, so Gwen offers her another bottle filled with water, suggesting Mira to stay hydrated. Gwen then starts taking Max to school because he has a football match scheduled for the day. Mira is concerned that Gwen might harm her son as well, so she tries to convince Max not to go to school today. However, Max is determined not to miss his football match and doesn't heed his mother's plea and continue to go with Gwen. Afterward, Mira goes back into Gwen's room and records a complete video as evidence, exposing Gwen's true nature. She then calls Todd and reveals Gwen's actions, telling him that he needs to come home immediately because Max's life is in danger, and they must file a police complaint against Gwen. However, as Mira is talking to Todd, Gwen arrives at home and realizes that Mira has discovered the truth. Gwen confronts Mira and tells her that if she wants Max to be safe, she must come with her and leave her phone behind. Mira walks with Gwen into the car, and on the way, Gwen confesses that she has worked as a nurse for so many years but has never been treated like a family member until Todd and Max came into her life. Now, she intends to replace Mira and make a permanent place for herself in Todd's life. Meanwhile, Todd rushes home but finds no one there. He discovers Mira's phone on the table and watches the video she recorded, exposing Gwen's true nature. On the other hand, Gwen arrives at her own home with Mira, where Mira desperately searches for Max. Gwen tells her that Max is still at school, and she brought Mira here to kill her. Mira tries to make a run but Gwen catches up to her and a struggle ensues between them. Eventually, Mira uses a nearby object to strike Gwen forcefully on the head, causing Gwen's demise. After these events, we see Mira, Todd, and Max living together as a happy family once again. And with this scene, the movie comes to an end. Subscribing to the channel will make my day better. See you in the next video. Till then, take care and goodbye.